Hey, folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream on a Friday afternoon. And, folks, what a day this has been. I would venture to say what we saw in the Oval Office of the White House earlier today was an historic moment. And let me just start off by saying this. No matter what you think, in some ways, this was not unprecedented. This exchange, of course, between President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, which got fiery. And we're going to talk about it. But I think back to, I believe it was 1986, the summit in Iceland between President Ronald Reagan and Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, they're all set. Just as today, there was this rare minerals treaty that was set to be signed between the U.S. and Ukraine. There was going to be a big press conference. It was supposed to be a very amicable affair. Well, it didn't turn out that way. But I think back, gosh, I believe it was 86. And President Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet premier, were all set to sign this arms reduction deal, a nuclear reduction deal. The good old Gorby was digging in his heels and didn't want to play ball. And guess what? Ronald Reagan, a man who really coined the term peace through strength, which has returned to the White House under Donald Trump, Ronald Reagan got up and he left. He said, I'm out of here. You don't want to play ball? You don't want to play games? Okay. I'm gone. So Reagan got up and he left. Now, much like today, you heard the mainstream media. Today, the mainstream media, their heads are exploding after what we saw in the Oval Office earlier. The mere sight of two alpha males who put their country's interest first, telling it like it is and putting someone in their place who needed to be put in his place. The beta male and beta female collection of mainstream media mavens and rhino Republicans, and of course the left, the Democrat Party, they're in a tizzy. Europe, of course, speaking of beta, they're in a tizzy. Guess what? They were also in a tizzy almost 50 years ago, almost 40 years ago, when Reagan walked out of that meeting in Iceland with Mikhail Gorbachev. So this is not completely unprecedented. And guess what? Good old Gorby came back to the table. He changed his stand. All of a sudden, after Reagan walked out, Gorby was less inflexible. And lo and behold, today, as Volodymyr Zelensky left the White House, and was asked to leave, by the way, he was booted. Zelensky tweets, thank you, America. Thank you, Congress. Thank you, President Trump. We are thankful. Okay. So, look, Trump, the art of the deal, we all know, the ultimate deal maker, using leverage. So let's kind of unpack what happened today. And this, by the way, this has global, larger ramifications for Israel, for the Middle East, for Europe. And guess what? I believe prophetic implications vis-a-vis Europe. I'm going to tell you why in a second. Are chess pieces moving here that are actually putting prophetic things into place? I mean, President Trump's return to office, I've called it the Trump effect. I've called it the shift, capital T, capital S. It's been absolutely earth-shattering in only a month, what we're seeing. And again, what's being put in line? What's being lined up right now? Let's take a breath. What do you think? We've got people from all around the world watching right now. What do you think of this? What do you think of what you saw today? And I know the chat here was very lively even before we went on air. What do you think of what you saw today, number one? Like it, dislike it, out of line, completely appropriate? What did you think? And number two, larger ramifications, prophetic implications. And what does this mean for Israel and the Middle East? You might say, Stakelbeck, what are you talking about? We're talking a European theater of war between Russia and Ukraine. Why are you bringing the Middle East into it? Well, I personally believe that Gaza, the Abraham Accords, potential peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, a potential peace deal between Russia, Ukraine, it's all kind of in some ways in the same pot in terms of rearranging the global chessboard. And it's happening fast. Folks, it's happening rapidly. You can't keep track, right? It's happening that fast. And you live in Bible times, you live in prophetic times, and it's really happening fast. Every day, you can barely keep track, right? Hey, I do this for a living. I live and breathe this stuff, and it's tough for us to keep track. My team, YouTube, but also we have a nightly current events program on TBN called Stakelbeck Tonight. And man, there's no shortage of content every day, needless to say. Your head's on a swivel every day, but I think that's going to be the nature of things going forward. I think the time we are in, or the times we are in, they are prophetic, and the chessboard is moving. God is in the midst of all of this. And I just returned from the National Religious Broadcasters Convention in Dallas, Texas. And I think the theme and the consensus among Christian leaders, solid people I respect who are there, is that we're in the middle of a move of God. God is moving, and he's shaking the nations right now. He's shaking the world. So congratulations. You want to live in a consequential time in world history? You are most certainly in one. So let's unpack this a bit. Volodymyr Zelensky came to the White House today, and as he's done many times over the past 3 years, and look, he's asking for more money. Let's cut straight to the chase. I think he's already received over the past 3 years some $300 billion, $300 billion from the United States, taxpayer dollars. I'm paying, my family's paying. I mean, out of U.S. taxpayers' pockets ultimately, and it's a lot of money. And look, Trump has said this. We consider that more of a loan. We'd like something in return. The rare earth minerals in Ukraine. Let's work something out there. We're glad to help, and Trump has made that clear throughout. We want to help. Look, we will assist Ukraine, but we can't have a blank check. We cannot write you a blank check for a war that's just not winnable. Let's be honest. Look, Russia has taken heavy losses. No doubt, Russian forces have been hurt badly in this war, a war they should have never launched, and which wouldn't have happened if Trump was in office. That goes without saying. And Ukraine has, look, fought valiantly, Ukrainian soldiers. But at the end of the day, folks, let's be honest. Ukraine ultimately can't win this war. So Zelensky, what he's coming here to do is saying, hey, keep the gravy train going. Under Joe Biden, who was barely there, I mean, I got whatever I wanted. He was like a spoiled kid. Give me $100 billion. Here you go. I need 50 billion more from where. Here you go. Whatever you want, whatever you need, whatever you want. And the problem with that is we've now come to a point, and I just interviewed a friend from Ukraine last week, a Ukrainian Christian who lives in Kyiv, who said, look, drones, rockets, every night still, we're being hit. They've taken massive losses. As Vice President Vance said today, they're literally grabbing people off the streets, young men, and conscripting them into the army. It's desperation time. And it's a meat grinder. 1 million people have been killed in the past 3 years. 1 million people, young men, Ukrainian, Russian men, again. And the fault lies with Putin. He should have never done it. He's an evil man. No one's defending Vladimir Putin. But this should have never happened. And now 1 million people are dead. And Trump is saying, look, number one, we can't continue to write you a blank check for a war that's not winnable. Number two, it's a meat grinder. People are dying. Something's got to give. Zelensky, it's time for you to talk about a ceasefire. And we will help you. We'll help you. We're trying to negotiate this thing. We're talking to Russia. We're talking to Ukraine. Trump has made clear, look, I'm trying to put an end to all these wars and all the madness that took hold when I was out of office those 4 years. And Zelensky says, no, I don't want a ceasefire. He's resistant. He comes to the White House today. And again, without United States assistance, this war would have been over. As Trump rightly said, this war would have been over in 3 days without America standing with Ukraine. And knowing that, you would think Zelensky would have humility and be thankful. No, he's got a chip on his shoulder, let's just say. And he does it in the Oval Office in front of the assembled press corps, in front of the eyes of the world, the media. And he was disrespectful. And he was called out on that. And he kept pushing. And it didn't go so well for him. As Trump and Vance together told him in no uncertain terms, this isn't going to fly. Enough is enough. Are you serious about ending this war or not? Do you want to continue with the meat grinder? Do another million people have to die? Do another 500,000 Ukrainians have to die in an endless war with no end in sight that you can't win? Are the American people just supposed to write you, okay, here's another 500 billion, here's, or I should say 50 billion, here you go. We have issues here at home in America that we needed to handle first. So you had what you had today in the Oval Office, and Zelensky was asked to leave the White House. Come back when you're serious. Come back when you're serious about peace. Come back when you're actually serious about doing a deal. And folks, for me, it was absolutely long overdue. Number one, the message that was delivered. Number two, Zelensky opened a can of worms that he should not have. I don't know who's advising him. And I'm sure he was on the horn before he came to the White House. Remember, this is a guy in October in Pennsylvania, my home state, who essentially campaigned with Kamala Harris, because the gravy train would have gone on forever under Kamala and Tim Walz, just as it did under Biden. It was zombie-like. Here's another 50 billion. Here's another 50 billion with no end in sight. So you know that he probably talked to the establishment types, veterans of the Biden-Harris administration, and they apparently were saying to him, stand up to Trump. Don't be bullied. Stake your claim. And embarrass Trump. Put him on the spot in front of the global media, in front of the assembled press corps. Man, bad move. Horrible advice. And now it really blew up in his face. And now we have even Lindsey Graham, the Republican senator of South Carolina, probably the biggest Ukraine war cheerleader, give him whatever they want over the past 4 years. That was Lindsey Graham. Give them whatever they want. Untold hundreds of billions of dollars just to keep the gravy train going. Even Lindsey Graham today, to show you how the tide has turned, at a press conference outside was saying how disappointed he was in Zelensky. Zelensky was disrespectful. I'm proud of Trump and Vance for standing up for American interests in front of the eyes of the world. Maybe Zelensky's not our guy, Lindsey Graham says. Maybe he needs to resign. Folks, talk about a sea change. I mean, when we talk about a shift and the Trump effect, wow. So that's what happened today. Now, what about the ramifications? And again, continue to opine here and continue to let me know what you think. And if I'm off base here. And if you know me and you watch this live stream for years, I think Vladimir Putin's an evil man. Now, you might say, oh, and it's funny because usually when I would say that in the past, I'd say, look, Putin's evil. What do you mean? I'd say, well, number one, former KGB. Now, that doesn't mean every former KGB agent is an evil person, but look, he doesn't seem reformed from the KGB days. He's ordered assassinations of political opponents, mounted invasion after invasion over the past 17 years, Georgia, Crimea, Ukraine. But I think the most, what has made me say, this guy's evil, is, and by the way, he's persecuted Bible-believing evangelical Christians in Russia, and he's targeted them in Ukraine as well, in areas he's conquered. He's all about the Orthodox Church, and that's it. So if you're an evangelical Bible-believing Christian like me, you're in big trouble. You're outside the mold of what he likes. But my biggest issue with him has been, you can tell a lot about a man by the company he keeps. Iran, China, North Korea. These are his friends. And his government has been in many ways hostile to Israel. So, sorry, I'm not jumping on the Vlad bandwagon. And many conservatives have. I ain't doing it. Here's the thing, and today crystallizes this. You can oppose Vladimir Putin and think he's a very bad man and still not be a fan of Zelensky and all that he's doing. And I think I've just laid that out in the first 10 minutes or so of this live stream. Because before I'd say, Putin's a bad guy. And in comments here on the channel, I'd get, you're a Ukraine lover, Zelensky lover. Zelensky's a bad guy too. The two aren't mutually exclusive. You can oppose Vladimir Putin and think he's not a nice guy and also not be happy with Zelensky's conduct and the blank check to Ukraine and the meat grinder. Does that make sense? I think it does. So that's the situation we're in right now. Now, I know a counter argument. I said, well, look, Putin did launch this thing and invade Ukraine. A lot of people, I had this conversation with a dear friend today who said, Stacks, wait a minute. Now, Putin was provoked. NATO pushed up to Russia's borders. NATO, they weren't supposed to do that. George W. Bush, those days, they were romancing Ukraine and they wanted Ukraine to even join NATO. Putin was threatened by that. He didn't let, and look, there's something to be said for that. No doubt. No doubt there's something to be said for that. It's certainly factored into his thinking. But at the end of the day, I come back to it, folks. China, Iran, North Korea. I'm an American. These are America's arguably three greatest enemies: China, Iran, and North Korea. Vladimir Putin is fully in bed with them. Not only that, he's romanced Hamas and Hezbollah, the Assad regime, a collection of Venezuela, Cuba. You can tell a lot about a man by the company he keeps. So let's establish that as well. Now, the other argument I've gotten, I heard it this week at the NRB convention with another dear friend who's got a lot of great information on Russia. And he said, Eric, look, there's revival in Russia right now. And he said, I can tell you, he said, from being in Russia frequently, the people of Russia are disgusted by the wokeness. Over the past 4 years, they said America has lost its mind. We reject the LGBT madness, the transgender evil, the targeting of little kids to mutilate them and change their gender. We reject it. America's lost its mind. So there's that piece to this as well. And I've heard many times, Putin opposes the LGBT agenda. Yes, he does. I've heard that many times. But you can pick and pick and choose and pick something from here or there that you agree with practically anyone in the world in many cases. You might agree on something, and 99% of the other stuff you disagree, they're bad. They're evil people. So I don't think this is too complex. I don't think it's complex. And that's why Trump is talking to both sides, which you have to do. He's a deal maker, right? And he believes this is why he's in office, to put an end to this kind of stuff and to set the world order right again. Meaning, look, America leads the free world. As long as America is a free country and sane, and Trump's been making America sane again. So we're seeing this unfold right now. And I got to say, I'm so impressed by J.D. Vance. And we talked about this here in the live stream a little while ago. His speech before that audience in Munich 2 weeks ago today, I mean, he told these European leaders in no uncertain terms to their faces, you're woke, you're weak, and you're committing cultural suicide. Thank you. Bravo. Folks, this is strong leadership with intelligence. It's not all brawn with no brains. J.D. Vance is surgical. And by the way, about a week ago at the CPAC conference in D.C., in about 2 minutes, he unpacked the gospel in such an eloquent, powerful way. I'm so impressed by this guy. And talk about, can you imagine Kamala Harris or Mike Pence in that room with Zelensky, putting him in his place? That's what a vice president should be. He defended the interests of his leader, of his boss, the president of the United States. Vance actually, look, if you watch that today, Trump was gracious in the first, he was gracious for much of that meeting. He listened, and Zelensky is making his case in front of the media, playing to the cameras, of course, trying to get that global sympathy. These are Zelensky's friends, the mainstream media and the left and European bureaucrats. And he was playing to them with the violins. And Trump took it for a long time. It was actually J.D. Vance who cut in and said, hold on a minute. You're being disrespectful. You're in the Oval Office of the United States. We are, our country, and this man, Donald Trump, we are preventing your country from being destroyed. Have a little respect and show a little gratitude. And that was Vance who kicked that off, actually, to his credit. That's a guy who's bold, the guy's smart as a whip. And I'm just so impressed by him, by this administration, and the move of God I've seen over the past month. And look, opening the first cabinet meeting earlier this week in prayer in Jesus' name. Trump, his entire cabinet, Scott Turner, the new HUD Secretary, Housing Urban Development, opens this meeting in prayer, ends it in Jesus' name. I say a lot here. Honor God, and he will honor you. We have an administration right now in America that is honoring God Almighty, no doubt. Establishing a White House faith office that is actually in the West Wing of the White House, within earshot of the president. Astounding. A task force committed to rooting out anti-Christian bias. A task force committed to rooting out anti-Semitism. Supporting Israel like no other. This is a dream team that's been assembled. God is moving, and hold on to your hats because it's happening fast. And for the body of Christ, for believers around the world, do you realize the moment we are living in right now? You're living in the midst of a move of God. So what are the prophetic implications of everything we saw today? And by the way, I think Volodymyr Zelensky will be much more amenable to a deal now, obviously. What are the ramifications larger? And I want to dig into Hamas, Gaza, Israel real quick. By the way, if you like what you're hearing, and we talk a lot of Israel, Middle East, all from an unapologetically biblical perspective. We talk the global scene, Russia a bunch too, Ukraine, but this is the story today. And it's going to have shock waves for months, possibly for years, in terms of how it's resetting the chess pieces on the board. But if you like what you're hearing, be sure to subscribe, click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. And where's this going? I had some really interesting conversations, as I've been recounting over the past few days here in Texas, with people from around the world, from Israel, from Russia, everywhere, visiting for the annual National Religious Broadcasters Convention, NRB for short. And one school of thought that emerged from some friends I talked to who are really in the know, well connected, was okay. What's shaping up here with Trump and his team, Steve Witkoff, his Middle East kind of point man. Endgame is coming, and you saw in the title Hamas, Gaza, Israel. Endgame is coming in Gaza. So let's unpack this from a few different perspectives. Endgame is coming in Gaza, meaning Israel wants to extend phase one of this deal. We're getting to the point where Israel is going to basically say, I think, give us all the hostages or else. Phase one is complete, but now Hamas is saying, well, we want to move on to phase two. Phase two is very friendly to Hamas. And Israel's trying to stretch that another 6 weeks to get more hostages out and give less in return. Smart. And they have the green light from Trump. Trump's saying, do what you need to do. Crush Hamas. Do whatever you need to do. Be tough. It's interesting because the American administration seems even tougher in Gaza than the Israeli government right now. And the Israeli government's been pretty tough there. But Endgame is coming there. And I think, and you saw the title of this live stream, I think Israel is going to go back in a major way. I read a report last night, maybe 50,000 troops would go back into Gaza and completely eradicate Hamas. Hamas signed its own death warrant on October 7th, no doubt. But now, over the past few weeks, with these grotesque displays, these parades of corpses, little babies that they strangle with their own bare hands, they've dug themselves they can't recover. They're digging themselves deeper and deeper. And the reason I say that, it's one thing if Israel's are outraged by it, but the rest of the world yawns. But President Trump's been outraged about it. The U.S. administration's been outraged about it to the point where they're pressuring Bibi, finish the job. These people are evil and they must be crushed. So I think Gaza is going to a place. I encourage you to read Zephaniah. I think it's chapter 2, verse 2. Someone was reminding me of this week about how Gaza becomes an empty place. And I think Israel is going to crush Hamas decisively. And I really do think the Trump relocation plan that we've talked a bunch about here over the past few weeks, folks, I think it's going to happen. I think there's a very good chance it happens. In the very least, even if it doesn't happen, it's going to spur change where the Arabs are going to step up, Egypt, Jordan, the Saudis, whoever. In the very least, Trump, like he did today in the Oval Office, has smashed the paradigm. The old tired way of doing things in Gaza, rebuild it. Hamas takes the billions of dollars in aid money and attacks Israel, builds tunnels, rockets, and attacks Israel again. Rinse and repeat. That's over. So Gaza is going to look a lot different. Number two, Ukraine, Russia, I believe that's going to come to a close. I don't know when, but it's going to come to a close. Gaza is going to come to a close. And again, we may be looking 8 months down the road. Israel, Saudi Arabia factors into this. The Abraham Accords back on the table. And talking to someone this week who's plugged into this administration in the U.S. who told me, look, Erick, it's going to shock you. Some of the other players that agreed to peace deals with Israel, it's going to shock you. So fasten your seatbelts, folks, because, and a lot of this is economic. Ports being built on the Mediterranean and in various countries, pipelines, all sorts of stuff that's being discussed. Trump has a grand vision in the region, well, beyond the region, beyond just the Middle East, but in Europe as well. And the good thing about all of this, one of the good things, is that it isolates China. The communist regime in Beijing is on the sidelines, and the Iranian regime is on the sidelines. And of course, North Korea is always on the sidelines, the hermit kingdom. Can Trump flip Putin? Somehow, I don't know about that, because Europe, and in terms of the prophetic implications, as we close out here, a few things. Big question that continues. Is or is not Russia in the Ezekiel coalition? Ezekiel 38, 39 that comes against Israel and what the Bible calls the latter days. I've always felt that Russia would be, along with Iran and Turkey. Some people say, no, Erick, you're wrong. Iran and Turkey certainly, but not Russia. I think we may be about to find out, folks. And I'm not saying that war's happening next year. It could be 20 years from now. I don't know. But because we're going to see over the next year which way the winds blow in Russia. And if they continue to get closer to Iran like they've been, that is not promising when it comes to their role in Ezekiel, in that Ezekiel war. That's number one. I think number two, prophetically, so Ezekiel shaping up. And look, if Israel lives in a land of unwalled villages, as Ezekiel says in Ezekiel 38 and 39, in the run-up to the war of Gog and Magog, look, if Gaza's at peace, if Israel signs a peace deal with Lebanon, if Syria is not friendly under this new Sunni jihadi leadership, but it's not a threat, all of a sudden Israel, if Judea, Samaria, the West Bank brought under control, we call Judea, Samaria the biblical heartland, all of a sudden Israel has unwalled villages and it's at peace for the first time since 1948, when it was miraculously reborn. Those seem to be the conditions that Ezekiel talks about that precipitate the Gog-Magog invasion. So that's something to keep in mind, number one. Number two, in a prophetic sense, Europe. We can debate all day long about, okay, and we hear this a lot, the Antichrist, is he from the Middle East? Is he from Europe? I've always tended to think he'll be from Western Europe. Along those lines, Europe has really been exposed over the past few weeks. Trump has called them out. Vance has called them out for their weakness, their wokeness, their irrelevance in many ways. And now they're saying, we better get our act together. Here you go. The European Union's top diplomat said today, she vowed to stand by Ukraine and said, the free world needs a new leader. It's up to us, Europeans, to take this challenge. So eventually, ladies and gentlemen, in Europe, I believe a leader will arise. His initials are AC. And that's always been my thought, that the Antichrist would rise in Europe. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he will rise out of the Middle East like some friends of mine think. I've always thought Europe. Only God knows. But I think certainly we're seeing, again, chess pieces move where Europe is saying, holy moly, we're getting steamrolled here by Trump and the United States. We need to do something or we'll be totally irrelevant. So they have some kind of, is there one strong European leader that can emerge? I haven't seen him. There's some good leaders there. Some, like a Giorgia Meloni in Italy, Viktor Orban in Hungary, etc. But look at France, Macron, Starmer in the UK. I mean, Germany just went right with a more moderate conservative party, but better than what they had. So we shall see. All that to say, you live in interesting times. And it's Shabbat. I'm about to go and give a speech at a Shabbat dinner, a joint gathering of Christians and Jews here in Dallas, which is going to be great. So I'm excited for that. So I'm going to go get changed, head to this dinner, and celebrate Shabbat with my dear friends and celebrate the God of Israel. But folks, wow, if anything happens over the weekend, we'll come back to you. What a day. And fasten your seatbelts. I just feel like God is moving so fast and events are moving so fast that if you have discernment and you know the Lord, you'll be just fine. And you'll know you're holding on tight, but you know, okay, all of this must come to pass. These are the days. Have a great weekend. Remember, shop.tbn.org for that Watchman merch that we just debuted. 50% off. Pretty cool. Good stuff there. Have a great weekend. God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.
Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.